Today, I wanted to start taking a look at our other bills. We took a look at 2239, and I wanted to kind of start the discussions on our other two bills, if that's your intent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That would be, and I don't want to put Eddie on the spot. I know you've been swamped. I was just wondering if we had another handout or it's okay if we don't. I've got my notes and we're good to go.
I'll see what I can come up with for the next time you all reconvene based upon what you talk about at this one, but I don't have anything for you right now.
Okay, so Madam Chair, it's my understanding we still have two other bills in conference. We have House Bill 2597 and House Bill 2106. Do you have a preference on which one of those we use for our, what I've been calling or referring to as our big ticket items?
I do not have a preference, Mr. Chairman, so whichever one you would like.
Okay, why don't we start with House Bill 2597, and I will go through a list that I had of items that we had kind of agreed, maybe tentatively, but we had pushed back into this other bill. And I would start off with the increase in the standard deduction. There was a 10% increase in the standard deduction, that provision. We also had, I don't think we had agreement on exactly what we wanted to do on this, but House Bill 2727 regarded the Social Security income tax cliff. I know there was some discussion on where we wanted to go with that, phasing it out completely or changing that formula. See, we also had find it on my list here. It was the NOL, net operating loss carry forward, and the employee retention tax credit pieces. Those two that we kept out of 2239. Sales tax exemption on commercial utilities. Retail storefront, COVID relief property tax bill, and then the elimination of the monthly prepaid sales tax. That's all I had in my notes. Please let me know if I missed something or if there's anything else you wanted to consider.
Mr. Chairman, I think we would add the child credit to that list too. Receptive. I know we want to take a second look. It may not make it in the bill, but at least take a second look. We also would ask consideration on the retirement.
On all benefits? Okay. We will add that to the list. Anything else Mr.
Chairman, I don't have anything else on my list.
Okay, so if we want to start looking at that list, stop me if we want to go a different route here, but I guess I would just like to start taking a look at what our offers are, and we started this phrase request for consideration. I like that. Got a lot of things on that list, but I really like what we're doing with the standard deduction that the Senate has proposed. And just to start us off, I guess I would like to accept the House position on the 10% increase in standard deduction.
Mr. Chairman.
And at this time, I'd like to start working on the Social Security income cliff provision. I didn't know if there was any positions or any offers that the Senate wanted to make at this time.
So if I may ask research a question on, you're going from 75,000 to 85,000, increasing the cliff, and then years out, you have an equation. Mr. Chairman.
The House, what happened in House Bill 2727 is we just put in a slope rather than a cliff. So right now, up to $75,000 of federal adjusted gross income, none of your Social Security income is taxed. Once you go over that $75,000 threshold, 100% of your Social Security income is taxed. It's a common misconception that people think that's $75,000 of Social Security income. It's your federal adjusted gross. And so what the House did is we put in a formulaic slope of a $10,000 range. So it adjusts if you have $80,000 in federal adjusted gross, that equates to a 50% tax rate on your, actually it's a subtraction modification, but it does not phase it out. It just creates a slope in there, so it's not all of a sudden you've went over that threshold and all of your Social Security income is now taxed. It's trying to ease into that, but there was not a phase out of the.
Mr. Chairman, we like the offer. We like what you did. We would ask consideration for a phase out eventually. Don't know how you would like that to work. Or consider increasing your slope. You started at a 10K. I think we looked at 25K, and it increases the fiscal note to $5 million.
I'm gonna try to find the email as I talk. It increased it to, I believe, to 5 million in the first year. It is higher in all years thereafter. I believe the House version was about 2 million in the first year, and then 6 to 7 million in all years thereafter. So this would have a kind of comparable upwards increase in the out years. But I'm going to try to find those actual numbers. Switch from a $10 million $10,000 phase out to a $25,000 phase out of the cliff, slope of the cliff, it's a $5 million fiscal note in 23, 16.9 in 24, and 17.4 in 25.
So, Mr. Chairman, visit a little bit. If we kept the slope where the House has, and then consideration for some type of phase out slope for retirement income also. The same calculation that the House had with Social Security. You can't do that turnaround. Something that you would consider. We need to look at the fiscal note, obviously.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're 100% certain, because we're talking about several different retirement benefits. Are you talking about combining both Social Security and phase out of the retirement, or do you want to handle both of those separately? Social Security and then retirement in a different provision, even if they
Chairman,
match?
we would be receptive to either way, so that you would consider a phase out for both eventually.
And what I considered, I thought about this last night, to phase it out using the formulaic system that we had in 2727. We could step that down, for instance, 10% per year. Current formula has from 75 to 85,000, and then it becomes 100%. You could step that down next year to say, at that point, once you hit that 85,000 threshold, it's now at 90%, and just slowly phase that top rate down until it's all the way to zero.
That sounds like something we'd be interested in. And would you use that same phase approach for both Social Security and retirement?
If we did that on all retirement, I think it would be consistent. I think it would make sense to do a similar type of approach.
We really like the concept. What we would like to do, and I'm sure you would appreciate it, we'd like to get fiscal notes on a couple of runs. Sign off on anything. Much appreciate that you're considering this and to try to find a solution. Maybe it's not 10%, maybe it's 5%, but somewhere where we can make it work. Up the apple.
Right, I agree completely because the total fiscal note on both of these provisions, once it's completely phased out, is close to $350 million. So a gradual approach, I think, would be financially responsible, and we do need to make sure we understand what the fiscal impact would be.
Okay, great. Eddie, do you mind? I know that's aggressive. Together.
I'm happy to work with the department on pulling things together. I'll need to work out exactly what the details of what you're proposing either now, or it might be easier to do it offline.
Yeah, we'd have to develop the formula for the retirement benefits. And my vice chair just asked a question. Is there a definition on what all is included on retirement benefits? Is that 401k, IRAs, all different? Could we just get a brief understanding of what all this would apply to?
So the easiest way to understand this is actually by virtue of examining the federal Form 1040, and there's a specific line on there that specifies retirement plan income, and there's a subcategory of that is exempt from federal taxation, and that is also exempt from Kansas state income taxation by virtue of conformity. And then the other subset of that is subject to federal taxation, and that flows on through and becomes subject to Kansas taxation by virtue of conformity as well. In terms of, you would have to get well into the weeds of the federal income tax code to get a precise definition of what is and is not taxed there. We can certainly work on that, but it's hard for me to tell you. I couldn't go rapid fire. This isn't, with the exception of the very big picture items.
Madam Chair, it seems like we're kind of on the same direction and same path with this, but we just need some time to kind of vet the details and figure out where we're going to go exactly.
That sounds great. And I know the Senate has passed removing both completely. So I feel like anything that we can negotiate and get can become.
With regards to just going down the list a little bit more, you mentioned the manufacturer's coupons. Could you remind me of our discussion on that? Was there some possible streamline ramifications there? That's a position the House, I think, would be willing to accept or make an offer on, that we accept your position, just pending there isn't any issues with the streamline agreement. Staff could address that.
The streamlined sales and use tax agreement as it currently exists does not permit the exclusion from sales price of manufacturers' coupons. At the request of the state of Kansas, the streamlined agreement governing board is currently considering an amendment to the agreement that would permit this exclusion. And the bill that the Senate passed, I believe it was SB 354, is exactly the language that the streamline governing board is considering. So, but I believe the streamline governing board next meets the first week of May, and they do have tentatively on their agenda to consider that amendment to the agreement at that meeting. But until that is adopted by the streamline agreement, the streamline agreement does not permit that exclusion as it stands.
Thank you. Well, in light of that information, I'd probably rescind that offer just until we get some clarity.
Understand, Mr. Chairman.
Madam Chair, we've had we've had some fairly good discussion on these other ones. The employee retention tax credit. I'm not sure if we've made any progress on analyzing the fiscal impact on that. I know there's some discussion on that. You know,
There's no update on the estimated fiscal impact.
Is there any of the other items that you'd like to discuss in further detail?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, there is a couple of them. The prepaid monthly, I think that we're all in agreement. We just need to, would we want to include the accelerated language that comes into effect in 2024 that we passed last year in legislation? Just leave that where it is when we accelerated plan to a monthly payment sales tax collection.
Madam Chair, we're willing to accept the Senate position on removing that, or just clarifying that it's an annual, quarterly, and monthly sales tax remittance. I think you were referring to was this discussion about the threshold limits and when they would take place, and maybe I'd look to Amelia for clarification. I think what we'd scheduled for 2024 would now take an effect 2023. Is that correct?
It could if you want to, otherwise we can leave it 2024. I was just asking for clarification.
I really don't have a preference if it's in statute now and people are kind of planning on 2024. If businesses and retailers have kind of planned on that, leaving that as 2024, unless you had a different argument.
No, my only consideration would have been that if it's easier for the department to make all the changes at once. That's all I was wondering.
Why don't we hold on that one and get clarification from the department? Because I like the efficiency of that thought process. So let's hold on that one, but put a plus sign by it, because I think we're both favorable to that. We just need some extra clarification.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And we're fine with it either way. We would just like it to be the most efficient way implemented. Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, the storefront rebate, I know that we were in negotiations on that last year. I would like that we both take a close look at that language. And I know we're under the short window of time frame here. So if we could pick that up when we come back, I would like to make sure that you guys have a good understanding of where it's at. We're excited about that language, and we were told, as you mentioned yesterday, there is a proviso in the budget to cover this. So that's good for all of us. We just want to make sure we get the language right.
I know one concern or something that I've considered about that is I think it's a 33%, or there's a third of the part that the local government is responsible for. My only concern with that is that money has to come from somewhere at the local government level. I don't want a local government to increase property taxes or use sales tax revenue and then hurt some of the other divisions of government trying to accommodate that. I completely understand the skin in the game. If they had orders that shut businesses down, that was significant. And I just have concerns that we're maybe exacerbating the problem on all the spreading the problem onto all the taxpayers for a decision that local government did make, but their money is the taxpayer money too.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. That's why I wanted you to take a close look at it. At the time when we passed that legislation last year, there was plenty of COVID money in the bank. I'm not sure that it's still there with the county governments, but there is funds available with Spark money and other monies. And so if that 30% comes back to the state, receptive to that too. It would be, the fiscal note right now is approximately 50 million, 55 million. That's why I said approximately. But, and so a third of that, if it was 50 million, obviously a $15 million note. So, but I think this would be a huge benefit to businesses. I know small hairdressers, other businesses that really felt the pinch. They had nowhere to go during COVID. They had never applied for walked through so many constituents through a system that they never had seen. They still had their property tax and other expenses due while they were shut down. So I think this would help. It's late, but better late than never. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for considering that.
I do want to point out, I've had some communications with constituents, and I do want to point out it's a small benefit. It's just on the property taxes. I know there was some talk about making them whole for all of the lost revenue from their business. That is not what this bill is doing. This is just reimbursing the property tax piece. I just wanted to publicly make that statement because I think there might still be a little bit of confusion out there in the public about what this bill is doing.
Clarification on that, Mr. Chairman. That is absolutely correct. And it's only businesses that had a storefront were shut down. Business or were not shut down and had other means. Legislation at all.
I just wanted to see on the child care tax credit, you had proposed moving that to more of an individual tax credit. I was curious if you had developed any language or any thoughts on that.
I considered it. I do have a lot of thoughts on it. I got some positive feedback, but I think at this late in the game, that would be, I think we'll take under consideration what you had said, that this is an existing program. We're just expanding an existing program so that small businesses have the opportunity to participate in the program also. So I think we'll go with that, and next year, the legislature can take a look at it. Thank you for your consideration on it.
Any other of the items that you wanted to discuss in further detail?
Thank you. I think we're the sales tax exemption for commercial on electric and other utilities. Sounds like you're receptive to that.
That's the one we're taking under consideration favorably. We haven't. I don't think we're ready to make an offer or to accept that position yet, but that is one we're considering.
Okay, thank you. I know we're waiting on the fiscal note on the other two. I hope that we can move forward. I'm not going to let the fiscal note scare me off on that legislation. Those are taxes that, again, probably shouldn't have been collected in the first place. Obviously, I hope we can clarify that language and get some.
And I completely agree with your position on that. If it's money that shouldn't have been collected, but the reality is it has been collected, and it does have a fiscal impact on the state, although it is bringing it back into fairness. I see both sides of that.
Mr. Chairman. So what time would you like to reconvene?
I think the House is recessed until 2. I didn't know what your schedule was, if you wanted to have a brief conversation on would now be 2106, the food sales tax. We kind of made an initial offer, and I was just curious if you had any movement or discussion on that piece. If you've got time, I didn't.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We absolutely have time. This is the highest priority in the building for me. Vice Chair, tax is, we are focused at this point. I know there's many other issues going on that are important to Kansas. Take our eye off this ball. So, Mr. Chairman, we did visit with leadership and others on the food sales tax offer that you had. That one of the items that was proposed was taking the 2019 legislation that you had talked about, instead of implementing as if it went into law, and where we would be at now, if you would consider that language this year or next year, the 2019 bill. You would just take a look at that.
Okay, so
I'm not saying that that's our positions, but that's what the Senate has asked us to do.
Correct. Okay. I just want to make sure I understand it. So there would not be an initial rate cut. We would put in that formula to use the internet sales tax. Do you have in mind, would you still use the 2018 base year? Do you know which base year is that from?
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. I will do some research and find out.
It might make a little bit of difference, but I just want to make sure we're using a base year before that was implemented.
I think they're anticipating using 21 as a base year.
For base year. Okay. And so you would not make an initial cut to the 6.5. It would just be buying it down based on, I think that formula was anything in excess of 3% of the revenue from the internet sale or compensating use tax growth.
That was one of the suggestions that Senate. Yes. We just ask that you consider that. Hopefully we'll find somewhere in between. I really like your offer. I personally would love to just sign off on it now. We all know that we're representing the Senate position, not
certainly
positions. So I appreciate you allowing us to take more time for consideration on it.
Okay. Yes, and we'll consider that and take a look at where that would put us.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that you consider adding all food to your initial offer. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
What time would you like to?
Does 1 o'clock? I didn't know what the Senate schedule was. Does that give us enough time to kind of take a look at some of these things? I want to make sure everyone has adequate time to.
So, Mr. Chairman, there is a conflict at 1. Would 1:30 be okay? My concern is, and I know everybody knows this, the revisers are absolutely swamped with the last piece of legislation, and we can get this legislation to them. So we can either go earlier or 1:30, whichever works better for you.
Let's plan on 1:30. And I will have to clarify with my committee assistant to make sure, because there was a little discrepancy. The room across the hall was being used at this time. I'll try to see which room is available at 1:30. And
we're flexible, Mr. Chairman, so okay. Whatever works out.
It'll probably either be here or just across the hallway. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.